All right, I think we are ready to go. We've got a good number of attendees in. We might still have a few more file in as we go on, but I want to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover in 45 minutes. So welcome everyone to the Cut the Clutter webinar with us, Charted, formerly SquareWorks. If you're a customer with us, hopefully you got the email letting you know. If not, welcome to Charted. Very exciting rebrand. We're very excited for this new stage in our cycle as a company. So we have got a few things to cover today. Let me get the agenda up. We're going to go through some introductions to get us started. Who I am, who's this other guy, why are we even here? I promise it'll be a little less existential than I am making it sound. We are going to get into the manual AP touchpoint problem. I assume we are all here because we have at least some problems with manual AP processes. Maybe you've got some time sinks in your process that you're looking to streamline. Maybe you just want to tie the bow on some already pretty lean processes, but we'll dive into some common problems here and then move on to our next big topic, transforming manual AP processes into touchless invoice processing. How has AP progressed from where it started and where is it going? And then we're going to talk about some of the value add in an integrationless AP automation solution. This is going to go beyond just taking advantage of features like touchless invoice processing. Okay, so introductions. Let's knock those out real quick. My name is Zoe Lewis, local green hair extraordinaire, aficionado of very large oversized glasses, and feeling very festive in my bats today. As the platform product manager, I oversee a lot of things that you may know if you're a charted customer, and a lot of things you may not notice quite as much. So my team handles things like vendor onboarding, workflow automation, but we also do a lot of what I call lights on work as well. So general maintenance, backend updates, security, so forth. Things you don't really notice unless it's not being done, and then you really notice. I have been with SquareWorks for just over a year, crossed my 1 year at the beginning of October, in fact. But I've been in the AP automation space for most of my career. It is an oddly niche space to wind up in. But here I am. I have been in product management, though, specifically for about 10 years. And I am joined here by my colleague, Mike. Mike, if you want to do a little quick intro, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I do not have as fancy of a show introduction as Zoe, but my name is Mike Johnson. I'm one of our other product managers here at Charted. I focus on our Invoice AI solution, which is going to be something we focus on pretty heavily in the webinar here today and some of the problems that that's able to solve, as well as our accrual automation feature, which is something that we launched last year. Hopefully, if you are a current customer, you've seen benefit and value in one or both of those products. And the team that I work with, really the brains behind the scenes, the engineers that make all of the magic happen, I get to have the privilege to work alongside them. I've been with Charted, formerly SquareWorks, for 4 years now. I just crossed my 4 years at the beginning of this year and have had the privilege to do a lot of different roles in my time here, all the way from being on our implementation team, customer support, and now a role as a product manager.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much. So let's get into the nitty gritty. So what do we mean when we talk about the manual touchpoint problem? And this really refers to every step of an AP process that requires some sort of human intervention. Honestly, the reality that I think most finance teams are facing every day is the manual nature of AP and the processes within it and the workflows. So from start to finish, think about all of the steps where someone has to intervene on your team. So we're talking recording that invoice data, coding, routing, approvals, PO matching, payment processing. Every single one of these steps has the ability to add friction. So if we go a little bit deeper, at Capture, we're looking at the high burden of data entry, coding inefficiencies, delayed processing. When you get POs involved, that is another layer of complexity that we're adding into the game. Now we're hunting down the right PO, we're managing exceptions, we're tracking partial billings. When we get to approvals, teams are often up against limited visibility into where the record is in the approval process. We're seeing delays in getting those approvals, vacations, how dare they, unexpected out of office. There's really bottlenecks galore in the approval space specifically. And then you get into the payment side and you've got your security risks. You've got risk of duplicate or incorrect payments. You've got late payment risk. Even gathering the correct information for your payment can be frustratingly time consuming and an error prone process. And that's a lot of steps, and it is not even all of them. So then you factor in the amount of time, questions checking, and double checking, validating. This starts to really add up. And every step, every delay, that is less time spent on critical work, that is less time spent on work that needs a human touch. And it is not to mention the increased risk of error, the delayed payments, the unrealized early pay discount potential. There's a lot that you see going into the problem with manual AP processes. Now we've got some stats here, and I actually really love these numbers because they are so relevant coming from NetSuite directly. Manual processes increase your cost per invoice by about 5 times. So imagine if your morning coffee order suddenly cost you 5 times more. I would imagine you'd probably be questioning your choices there. And that is exactly what your manual AP process is doing. We are quietly, unexpectedly, unintentionally turning every invoice into a venti caramel sized drain on your budget. And it is not just the cost. Manual AP processes are also about 30% more prone to errors. So now your coffee that is 5 times more expensive is the wrong coffee about a third of the time. And I think if you were in that situation, you'd have some trust issues with your coffee, with your barista. And frankly, you should have those same trust issues in a manual data entry process too. Now, these small inefficiencies probably seem a little harmless on their own. An occasional cup of overpriced coffee, not a big deal, but they do. It adds up quick if you're doing it every day, if it's every invoice. This is going to create a substantial drain on your AP functions. All right, so real quick, I want to take a step back. I'm going to take a moment. I want to hear from you guys. You should all see a poll pop up on your screen here. Which repetitive manual task consumes the most time in your AP team for your AP team each week? Is that going to be the manual data entry, the review process itself, managing bottlenecks? Maybe somebody went on PTO unexpectedly. Maybe they just take too long in general. They're just a slowpoke. Is it the coding process itself? I have my suspicion, but I am interested to see what feedback we get here. So I'm gonna give everyone a second here. I always feel like I should have the Jeopardy theme like queued up on my phone just to ride us through this one. All right, and ooh, good split. All right, so this, okay, a little in line with what I thought. So we are looking at 45% say manually entering the data for routine invoices. Next up at 34%, we've got managing processing bottlenecks and reducing backlogs of predictable invoices. That's most of it. Then we've got our allocating GL codes and cost centers at 17%. And most people say not many people are spending a whole lot of time just doing the reviewing of the vendor invoices themselves. So my lean was for the manual data entry, so I was pretty spot on, but I didn't expect 34%. I didn't expect that high on the bottlenecks. Awesome. All right, so let's get into, come in, the transformation to touchless invoice processing. So we're going to talk about transformations happening in the invoice processing space and how has the market as a whole moved from the maze of manual steps to a more streamlined AP process. So early in the industry, manual meant manual. And some of you might be old enough to remember manual journal entries and manual journals, which is where we get the term journal entry, even as we have progressed to using computers and ERP systems. And because I love a good fun fact, that is called a skeuomorphism. That is where modern systems and designs retain elements from older or obsolete forms. So, fun fact. The most famous example is the floppy disk for save action on computers, which I have heard rumor that the Gen Z kids don't know that that's a floppy disk or what a floppy disk is, which let me tell you, that aged me 10 years immediately. So anyway, we have moved from truly manual act of recording these entries in a journal to manually entering the data in an ERP. Even in the ERP systems, though, this is going to be time consuming, this is error prone, and it is hard to scale that effectively. So then some companies started moving towards templated OCR. And this was certainly a step forward, but it is not without its own qualms. We find these processes tend to have rigid extraction rules, they're expensive to maintain, and again, they are difficult to truly scale the process. Templated OCR also, due to its tighter and more rigid rules and setups, often still require a fair bit of manual intervention for anybody with non-standard invoices or for processes and internal rules that don't align to the template precisely. Now, then we see a transition into AI-powered OCR in their traditional sense, and this is really where Charted stepped into the game at the time SquareWorks. By leveraging AI, we were able to break free of those templates and their rigid extraction rules. We're able to decrease the cost of maintenance, but we found that there were still some challenges in terms of flexibility. Traditional AI OCR processes just simply cannot learn and adapt to businesses and their needs. So this is where we move to that next iteration, and this is where we are now with next gen AI powered OCR. Still template free, still lower maintenance cost, but now that AI can learn and it can adapt to your business. And we can bring in additional flexibility by leveraging natural language models. Now, of course, the AI market as a whole is incredibly exciting with all of the potential it has to bring across all kinds of industries. And with the speed at which it continues to shift and improve, we really expect the next gen processes to continue to evolve and become more and more efficient and effective. All right, so I'm going to do one more poll real quick. This question is a little bit similar to our last question, focused a bit more on the bottlenecks in the end-to-end process. Which AP function creates the biggest bottleneck for your team? Is that going to be the approvals? Is that going to be processing payments and getting those out the door? If you're still cutting checks in-house, that process can be a bottleneck, especially if you're getting wet signatures. Is it the bill entry process? So we'll give folks just a minute. All right, and let's see. Bill entry is looking at 47%. Again, another tight race between the top two. So we've got bill entry at 47%, approvals coming in tight behind at 41%, and then tied for third place, processing payments and cutting checks and getting checks signed. You know, I always say, so again, I've been in this space for coming up on, gosh, over a decade. And I find that as much as we all want to say we want to get rid of checks, my goodness, they are simply the process that will never end. I don't know that we'll ever truly see an end to checks, but they do seem to be the ever sticker. All right, awesome. So let's see, what do we have next? Come on. All right. So I want to hop into what is probably the more exciting part of this entire process. Let's see what touchless invoice processing looks like in practice. So I am going to pass controls over to our very own expert in residence and let him walk us through that process. So Mike, it is all you.
Thanks, Zoe. I will go ahead and take over the screen share here,
Yep.
and let's go ahead and jump into the demo. Yeah, so just kind of a little bit of background before we jump into the demo, tying it back into what Zoe was talking about. Um, you know, uh, we understand that there's a lot of pain points in the AP process, and Charted has been committed for our entire time that we've been developing software to really make the process as efficient as possible. So when we started as just a service provider, a NetSuite implementation provider, we were working alongside our customers and realized, hey, having to do data entry inside of NetSuite is very inefficient, and we think that there's a better way. That's when we developed our kind of first generation OCR solution that Zoe was talking about. It was AI based, but it wasn't as flexible as our more recent products. We continued to iterate and improve on those and got to the point where we really feel that we have a great product that even enables our customers to create bills without the need for anyone to even look at them as far as the bill entry process. And from the results of our survey here, it sounds like a lot of the people on the call are feeling that pain and could benefit a lot from what we have to offer here. So if you are familiar with our products or not, just to just give a real refresher here, Charted builds NetSuite native AP automation solutions. So everything that you're doing is inside of NetSuite as an integrationless product. You don't have to worry about an external portal or hooks and connectors. The entire process for you is happening inside of the system. So if you're an AP professional, when you log into NetSuite, you're very easily able to see right on your home dashboard where your bills are and what you need to look into. I'm going to quickly drill into the AP inbox here and look what is in the inbox for me to review. It's going to show me a list of invoices that have been sent in. There are two ways that you can get invoices into the system to have them processed by, Charted AP Automation and Invoice AI. The first way is through email. That's really the most common way that we see invoices coming in from vendors. So those get sent into maybe your AP inbox and forwarded into NetSuite, and you don't have to worry about it. That's part of that whole like touchless flow that can happen. You also do have the option to drag and drop files in and have them uploaded in real time. I'm going to go ahead and just drop a couple files into my demo account here, just for the sake of our demo. These could, again, come in through an email, so I wouldn't even have to do this step, but kind of easier to show you here in real time what's going on. So those files are going to be uploaded right here within the inbox for me. We're going to go ahead and scan those files and try to extract the relevant information that we can off of the invoices. And then depending upon if they meet certain criteria, we can go ahead and auto create those in the system for you, so I don't have to open them up and look at them. Within the inbox, you will see that there is some high-level information that's displayed to me once the invoice is scanned. Things like who's this vendor, what's the subsidiary, what's the invoice number, PO numbers, dates, and amounts. Invoice AI is also a very robust tool that's able to support, multiple subsidiaries, as you can see by there being a subsidiary option on the screen here itself, as well as multiple currencies, multiple languages. All of that kind of stuff is supported by our product. We also have the ability to filter by certain things within the inbox. If you have multiple people managing your very robust, large AP team, they can go into the inbox and they can find things that are, just assigned to them that they need to process, or maybe look for bills in a particular status or for particular vendors. So because these invoices that I uploaded did meet certain criteria, those criteria can be things like, hey, it's joined with a purchase order. We see that the purchase order is an exact match to this invoice that we've just received. Or for certain vendors, you have the ability to turn on a feature for a certain vendor and say, hey, I want you to automatically create bills that come in and are matched to that particular vendor. So these both got queued up for auto processing for me to say, hey, yep, we think the system can go ahead and take care of processing those. Take them just a minute here to probably process. Let's go ahead and refresh, and we can see that just like that, they've already disappeared off of my screen. I don't have to do anything else, and they're already in the system ready for processing. The only thing that's left are things that maybe require a little bit more attention from me as an AP professional. So we do acknowledge and we do realize with a invoice process that there are still things that require a human intervention. There are still things that are going to require the AP professional's expertise, right? We're not trying to fully eliminate them from this. We're just trying to make them more efficient and make them more focused into things where they can really add value. So there's invoices that are very straightforward, or those invoices that come in and match a purchase order exactly. How much value does the AP professional add to that process just to open up the split screen view and click the save button? Let's go ahead and take those out of their queue, make it so those get auto created and processed touchlessly, so that they can focus on things that maybe require more intervention, or maybe need to be allocated a little bit differently than the way that the vendor wants to send them to you, things like that. And that's really easy with our solution as well. So I'll just show you a quick example on this other one that might be in my inbox. I can click into anything that didn't get auto processed, and I'm taken into our split screen view. I can see on the left side of the screen the invoice that was scanned by Invoice AI, and on the right side of the screen, I see my native NetSuite vendor bill form. However, that's been set up in my instance of NetSuite. However, the fields have been named, custom fields have been added, all of that will be available for me. Invoice AI will try to populate as much of the information as it can. So we can see things like the invoice number, vendor, dates are populated for me. At the line level here, brought in the descriptions for me. It actually coded the invoice as well. Based on what it's seen in the past, it tried to predict some automated coding for me. It was even able to extract these service dates off of this particular example and go ahead and map those into the start and end date field that's on my vendor bill form. And how we're able to do that is really part of the, the behind the scenes magic that's enabled touchless invoice processing. So I chose in my demo account to not make this one auto create, but in all honesty, probably all the information is here that I would need, and I probably could have set this invoice up to auto create. And how we're able to do that is through what we call AI directions. So as Zoe was talking in the initial presentation, we mentioned that Invoice AI is able to adapt to your business. And one of the ways that it's able to do that is through these AI directions. So AI directions are just natural language prompts that help us understand how to extract information in a way that matches your business needs. So for that example that I just showed you, no, I set up a direction and I said, when you see the word service period, I want you to go ahead and extract the beginning service date that you see on the end line, and I want you to put it into this custom field or the standard field that I have on my vendor bill form. Go ahead and grab the end date for me and put it into the end date field. So that's something that, as we talk about, even in the polling question, the burden of just data entry in general, right? We're all going to be on different stages of our journey towards touchless invoice processing. Some of the people on the call might still be doing everything manually, right? And just getting our solution installed and having the bare, basis of an AP automation solution is going to be a huge step forward for you as an organization. Others of you may be already using our tool, but you're still finding that there are these instances where, hey, I'm having to enter this piece of information over here, or for this particular vendor, I'm entering that piece of information over there. And that's where Invoice AI can take it to the next level. And we can in some instances, take those examples that you're still having to do something. And as long as there's some logic and some reason behind this is what's coming off the invoice and this is where it's going in the system, we can automate that process through AI directions. And it's not super technical in the sense that you're writing code here, right? This is essentially kind of like a form of prompt engineering, and we're all getting familiar with, hey, how do we use AI and how do we write, and ask ChatGPT or whatever your model of choice is, good questions. And that's really what we're doing, but we're bringing that into your invoice process. We're bringing that into your AP department and just making them more powerful and efficient in their job. Another example that I'll quickly show you here is related to one of the invoices that I had auto process. So I'll show you the example and then we will go look at the result. So this is a pretty common use case that I've heard talking to customers. And again, just get your wheel spinning a little bit about how these AI directions can be used to automate something that a user maybe was doing already before. So a lot of times I found working with customers, especially for utility bills, they might not have a unique identifier on the invoice itself. So oftentimes every company has a little bit of a different flavor of what they're doing here, but they'll take some sort of mashing together of multiple pieces of information off that invoice to make a unique identifier. So it might be the account number, the month that the invoice was for, or the statement was for, and the year of the invoice. That's probably the most common one that I've seen. So for this particular vendor, I wrote a direction and said, hey, when you see PGE, which is the utility vendor I'll show you here in a second, for the invoice number, this is what I want you to do. I want you to concatenate the account number, the invoice number, and the year of the invoice for me. And that's what we're going to use as the invoice number. Because if we didn't have Invoice AI, that's probably what I was doing anyways. As an AP professional, I was sitting there on every single invoice and having to type in that same value when the new invoice came in. So why don't we just go ahead and leverage AI directions, and just automate that process, automate what the user was doing. I did choose to give an example. That can help with context, right? Because if I just said concatenate account number, invoice number, and year, there's lots of ways that those values could be concatenated. So I chose to give it an example as well to say, hey, that's the format that I expect you to return to me when I ask for that. So just as easy as that, if I go back to the inbox, I'm going to jump over to our process tab, which if you're familiar with our products, this is something that has come out a little bit more recently. It's a nice way to find those invoices that have recently been created. Here's those two invoices that were auto-created for me at the top of the call. One was with a purchase order like we saw, and the other one was my standalone invoice for PGE. If I open up that invoice, it's going to go ahead and show me what was created. And we're going to see that for the invoice number here, right? That invoice number, reference number inside the system, it did exactly what my direction told it to do. It found the account number that was on the invoice, made that the first part. It found that this was for August of 2025. It brought all those things together in a consistent, fashion like I asked it for. And that's what represented the invoice number inside of the system. So this is a really powerful tool for helping you kind of increase that, um, level of accuracy. Accuracy is a term that gets thrown around in a lot of different ways in a lot of different contexts. One of the things that I like to remind, even our own customers is that, accuracy, there's lots of different layers to it. So we can think of accuracy as, how good are we at identifying that there is an E, an N, an E, R, G, Y on the page, energy? How good are we at picking up those letters? How good are we at putting those into the word energy? But then the next level of accuracy is how good are we at picking up the pieces of information in the way that you expect? So for instance, how good are we at identifying what you want as the reference number? How good are we at identifying what the vendor name is on this particular invoice? If there's an invoice, this one's a little bit less standard, but if there's an invoice that has a table on it, how consistently do we pick up the lines of the invoice, right? So that's kind of layer two of the accuracy journey. And then layer three is kind of the interpretation of the data into what you expect inside the system. So it's things like, how is that invoice coded? Um, maybe what subsidiary is it assigned to? Did we find that vendor as an actual vendor in your system? So accuracy can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but what this does is it gives you a tool in a way, especially with things like, like invoice number, like I just showed you. No standard model, even if it was an AI approached model, would probably know that your business for this type of vendor expects the invoice number to be the account number, the month in the year, unless you told it that way. You told it that you wanted that in some way. Can't even talk today. So that's where AI directions are a great tool to help us understand what your business needs and make sure that you see the most value out of the solution. So all of that was kind of a little bit of a dive that I wanted to talk about into what a little bit of the functionality that's new. So the ability to have those bills auto created is something that's new that we just launched in our product. If you are a current customer, I would highly encourage you to contact your customer success manager, figure out, make sure that you have access to this new functionality. We can send you some information about that through your customer success manager, and there will be some other exciting announcements that are coming out here in the coming weeks. This is kind of the little bit of the beginning of the launch of this new functionality around Touchless, and you're getting a little bit of a sneak peek before everyone else on what we've been working on over the past couple months. Once the invoice is in the system, though, the journey's still not done, and there's lots that our software can do to help automate manual processes. So the next part of the process is typically some sort of approvals. Even though we got the invoice into the system in a very systematic, automated fashion, it doesn't mean that you still don't want approvers, cost center owners, department managers, people like that to approve the bill in the way that it's come in. And that can all happen still as you would expect. So when I created this through our auto processing, our touchless invoice processing, it did go ahead and submit it automatically for approval. We do have a very robust approval engine that can handle very complex approval processes. I do have a pretty simple one set up in this demo account. But we can set up approvals based on pretty much any sort of information that might exist on the invoice, like coding details is very common from my experience of doing implementations. You might say, well, if it's coded to this department and this subsidiary, I want this person to approve it. If it's coded to this other department and this other subsidiary, so-and-so should approve it. Obviously, you'll probably have thresholds built into there, right? The larger the bill, the more approval it probably needs. But we can also take into consideration things like, is this associated with a purchase order? Is it not associated with a purchase order? What are the variances that might be in place? And does that decide whether additional approval or what level of approval is required? Another big differentiator of our approval engine that sets us apart is the ability to send out automated approval emails. So if you are AP, if you work in an AP department, and I think that approvals were one of the things that was pretty high on the list in our survey results. I think it was 33, 37%. So pretty high pain point bottleneck for a lot of the people on the call here. I've seen this very often before companies implement our solution. Their AP department is manually reaching out to approvers, and they're doing it through email. They're sending them all the information. They're waiting for approvers to respond to that email. People don't approve. People get busy. I can be guilty of it as well, and not respond to emails sometimes. Right? We all get into that busy mindset. So the nice thing about Charted's AP automation and our approval automation feature as part of that, we can send out these automated approval emails. It will look like what you're seeing on the screen as an example. You can add information or remove information based on what your company needs. It will include a copy of the PDF so the user can very easily see this is what the vendor sent into the system that I'm approving as part of supporting documentation. They can see the approval history. So if they're a later level approver in the process, they can see that people underneath them approved before it reached their desk and they're being asked to approve. We also can send automated reminders, so you and the AP department aren't chasing these people down. That can be set up in whatever frequency you really want. I used to love to do demos and be on demos with AP teams and tell them that. You can technically, if you want to set it up to schedule it, I think you can schedule it hourly. So if you really want to make sure your approvers are approving in a very quickly, you can set up your reminders as quickly as let's remind them every hour to approve. But in general, most people say, hey, I want to remind my approvers every, 3 days. If they haven't approved it, go ahead and send them a second email. Make sure that they remember, bring it to the top of their inbox so they can go ahead and approve, and we can keep things moving forward. Like Zoe said, there's lots of downstream effects of not getting invoices into the system and approved in a timely fashion. And we're trying to build tools that both make sure you have the controls that you need, but also make your business as efficient and get the value of things like early pay discounts, making sure you're not late on the bills to preserve those vendor relationships that you might have that are crucial to your organization. I'm going to go ahead. If you do have access to NetSuite, you can obviously approve within the system. Oops, looks food. Maybe I'm a little hungry now. Let's try looks good. You can enter approval comments both through email and through the system. If you are approving inside of the system, we do capture those on the approval history tab, so you have that for audit purposes. Once the bill is fully approved, it will post like you would expect in native NetSuite. It'll be available in all of the out-of-the-box NetSuite reports. So that's an advantage of having a NetSuite native solution, an integrationless solution. You're not worrying about those hooks and connectors and syncs. NetSuite is your source of truth, your system of truth, and you're able to leverage all of the information inside of there. We also do, I'll wrap up here and then turn it back over to Zoe for I think a few closing slides, and we'll save a few minutes for questions as well. But the last thing that we do offer here in the process that I'll show today is payment automation. Once the bills are in the system and they're ready to be paid and you create those bill payments, instead of you needing to go into your bank portal manually, which is a process I still hear a lot of people doing, or some people are leveraging something like a NACHA file that they're creating and sending to their bank. All of those processes they are still pretty manual, even if you're doing a NACHA file, and they also have security risks involved in them too. A NACHA file is actually just a text file. And you get a bad actor that knows what they're doing, they can corrupt that file potentially and cause, your business a lot of headache. So what we do as part of Charted Payment Automation, once the bill is marked as ready for payment, it's going to flow into our release payment screen. This is there's a special permission tied to who can do this. You can decide which users in your organization are able to release payments, but they're doing that inside of NetSuite. They're not worried about doing that outside of the system. They have one single place to manage your AP process. They're able to see the payments that are available for release. They are sorted by things like what business entity or subsidiary is paying that particular bill. We can support all of your payment needs that you might have for your vendors here. So we can do things like ACH payments. We can handle check payments. I don't have an example of a check payment here. Someone must have released it from my demo account, but we can handle check payments as well as international payments for international vendors that you might have. The thing about check payments, we do still offer some of our customers the ability to print checks in-house, but a new offering that we've been doing for a while now is an off-premise or outsourced check printing. So instead of you printing the check in a house, stuffing it in an envelope, mailing it to your vendor, we can take care of that for you. When you release the payment, it will be printed, stuffed in an envelope, dropped in the mail. You don't need to worry about it, get all the paper cuts. It's still one of the most expensive ways that you can pay your vendor. Like Zoe said, it's really hard for us to get away from checks right now. So there is a need for it, but being able to outsource that burden and use payment automation to still issue those checks on your behalf can still significantly save your organization time and money in the long run. That's all I'm going to have time to talk about here because I know that I need to turn it back over to Zoe to wrap up. I didn't get to talking to some of our accrual functionality and vendor onboarding, kind of just focused on the middle of the process there, but I actually think Zoe has a quick recap to kind of talk about everything that we have to offer. So I'll turn it back over to you, Zoe.
May unmute, that would be helpful. Wonderful. Let me get the webinar back up. All right. Try and move everything around on my screen again. I think every time I touch something, it moves 15 other things around over here. All right. So thank you, Mike. We do have just a couple more slides here that I want to go through. So with Charted, you really can see how touchless invoice processing can really simplify your processes and free up your time to focus on more important matters. And with Charted, as Mike touched on a fair bit here, you get so much more than that, from vendor onboarding and management all the way through the invoice ingestion process, approvals, accruals, and payments. We are the only end-to-end solution that is integrated directly into your NetSuite environment and requires no integration. Now, why is that integrationless approach so valuable? Traditional AP automation tools require external connectors, they require data syncs, switching between systems. Each of these things adds another potential point of failure. And why are we going to add increased risk, increased complexity, possibility of new bottlenecks when our goal is literally the exact opposite of that? Seems silly, right? So with Charted's NetSuite native automation, you're going to get your entire AP process in one location. You're getting real-time insights as there's no waiting for your data to sync, no waiting for that reconciliation process. And you're getting simpler maintenance with lower risks and no integration to manage, patch, or break. And of course, we can't cover everything that Charted can bring to your team on this webinar, but if you are interested in a more tailored or focused demo on any or all of our products, we are more than happy to set something up. Just let us know, and we'll connect you with one of our consultants. And wrapping up here, please don't forget to download our latest ebook, NetSuite AP Workflow Automation, The Touchless Future. In this ebook, you're going to see how finance teams are saving and scaling smarter with AI-powered automation in NetSuite. You can download that now via the QR code, and we'll also have it available on our website for download. Additionally, everyone in attendance today should receive a copy of the ebook in their inbox after the webinar. And I think we have just enough time for a question or two. Please feel free to send in your request. And even if we don't have time to get to it right now, because there is one thing I have never been accused of, and it is talking too little, we will be sure to reach back out to you with an answer. Caveat to that, we cannot reach out if you submit anonymously. So please make sure that you are including your information when you respond, so that we can reach back out to you if we don't get to it on the call. So the first question I have comes from Julie Kelly. Mike, she just wants to confirm that there, with the touchless process, there's no longer a vendor invoice record. It's already a bill just pending approval.
Yeah, Julie, I don't know exactly like how your account's set up. People can rename certain records, so that's where there's a little bit of a nuance to this question. When the document comes in, the way that our process has always worked, we do store information kind of at a high level in that inbox, but it's immediately transformed into a vendor bill. So instead of you having to manually do that, what our system is able to do now under certain criteria, I always want to make sure that's clear to people, like you are in control over what gets processed automatically or touchlessly. It does that, creating of the bill for you and submits it for approval without you needing to do anything else. So Then vendor invoice record could mean a couple different things to a couple different people, but essentially what would happen there is you would automatically get, the vendor bill record created for you without you needing to open it up within the inbox.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Mike. Next question we have comes from Hiomara Sanchez. So in their setup, some of their vendor IDs are different, and the invoice, of course, just shows the company name. Um, does the bill inbox invoice upload only read the vendor ID or the company name on the vendor profile as well? And can you change the vendor name before auto processing in case it picks up the wrong one? They do have multiple subsidiaries that use the same vendor as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. So with our Invoice AI solution, we don't just rely on the invoice or like what the vendor name might be on the invoice that's scanned, because point out a good point. That happens all the time when I'm working with customers. What shows up on the invoice, there's different flavors of how companies enter that inside of their instance of NetSuite. It could be abbreviations. There's lots of different reasons why that happens. So we do have learned behavior over time that says, okay, this is what we saw in the invoice, but this is the vendor ID or the internal ID of the vendor that we're supposed to select. And Invoice AI can learn that over time. Now, the first time it might not know. The first time you scan an invoice for that vendor, if you're new to the system, or if you onboard a new vendor and there's some disconnect, it's not going to know what vendor to select, and that in and of itself would disqualify us from being able to auto create the bill for you, right? Because we need to know what vendor to associate it with if we're going to auto create the bill. But there is a little bit of a learned behavior there. Same thing with subsidiaries. You mentioned that you use you use the same vendor with multiple subsidiaries, also very common within NetSuite. And we have logic to look at the invoice, try to figure out which entity it's invoiced to, but with things like the bill to information to try to assign it to the correct subsidiary. When you're moving towards touchless invoice processing, what I always recommend is there could be a period of time where you still have a little bit more oversight with someone, reviewing bills, so we can kind of understand that the bills are being created properly for you. As you see that, hey, all I'm doing is opening up the invoice, everything looks good for this particular vendor and hitting save, that's when you would probably at that point want to opt it into a touchless flow. So that's typically what we've seen with some of our early adopters, and just kind of a good industry practice. On day one, you want a little bit more review inside of the process, and then you see that the system's working well for you and you adopt more automated touchless technology.
All right, great. That does bring us to 2:45. We are at time. I know that there's actually a lot of questions that came in today. You guys have been a very engaging audience. Thank you so much. We will reach back out to any non-anonymous submissions and make sure you guys get the answers to your questions. But in the interim, thank you guys so much for attending. I appreciate your time. We will be in touch, and everybody have a great rest of your day.